I think sometimes the biggest and best changes in recovery aren't the ones that everyone can see. It's not about the food or weight so much, but it's about the way that your life slowly starts to feel like yours again. In this video, I'll mention eating disorder recovery, mental health struggles, and the lingering effects of trauma, but I'm not going to go into any of the graphic details of behaviours. I remember about 5 years ago, I was writing and came to the realization that without my eating disorder, I was scared I would have nothing. That, of course, I knew I wanted to recover, but when I took my eating disorder out of my life, I couldn't see what my days would be filled with. I didn't talk to friends, my dad lived hours away, I didn't have hobbies, didn't have any close relationships. The only reason that I went out or saw anyone was because of my eating disorder. I was terrified of how hollow I would be if it didn't fill my days. And for a long time, I used to feel like I was this huge burden, like I was covered in black ink that came from my eating disorder and trauma, and that the ink filled every space that I entered. I felt like if people got too close, they'd be covered in it too. And I think that that's why relationships always felt heavy, even when they were full of care. I felt like my presence was a risk. Even myself, I wasn't sure I could be trusted or if I was broken in ways that could never be fixed. Since I've been in recovery, though, that's completely changed in a way that I wasn't sure was possible. I didn't think was ever going to happen. I have more confidence in myself now. I believe that I can manage life, work, have energy, and handle really hard emotions. I've realised that many of the things that I thought were permanent flaws, like being exhausted or lazy or tearful, hypersensitive, incapable, weren't actually me. They were symptoms of living inside an eating disorder, of living in highly intense environments, of being exhausted and undernourished. And once those things started to release their grip, I finally started to feel like myself again, not broken or dangerous to be around, just me. And I actually have a great deal of love and care to give, with finally the freedom to show that. And it's strange to put into words, but I think that part of recovery is claiming your own authority over yourself. I've noticed that I make decisions differently now, not because I'm perfect at it, but because I trust myself to some degree. I no longer shrink away from making a choice because I'm terrified of the consequences. That doesn't mean I never feel fear, sometimes I do, but fear doesn't rule me in the way it used to. Don't get me wrong here, I'm still extremely indecisive and sometimes take a while to get there, or I try and beg others to help me. But it's no longer because I feel completely incapable or like the consequences are really big. Relationships too have shifted in ways that I didn't expect. My romantic relationship, for example, feels lighter and calmer than I ever imagined that it could. I can give my attention fully without having to constantly make space for an eating disorder or to protect others from the weight of me. Excuse the pun. I still work on boundaries, and I think I always will, but it's easier now because my self esteem is stronger. I feel more capable of being honest, of asking for what I need, of accepting support without being consumed by it. And conflict doesn't feel like a looming disaster anymore. I imagine that if it happened, I could handle it, because I'm not automatically blaming my mental health or feeling like every misstep is catastrophic. I feel like I have the tools and the energy to cope, and I'm in a safe environment where they work. Friendships can be a bit more complicated for now. They're still a work in progress, and meeting new people can feel hard. But even there, I notice that I feel less fear of being a burden. I feel far more confident in social situations, and I feel a sense of belonging and my place when I'm in groups. I think that's the hidden mechanism people often overlook. When you stop seeing yourself as fundamentally broken, you stop negotiating life around hiding your suffering. You can show up, in small ways, just as you are. And emotions are another area that's shifted. Before, they were really extreme and they felt really uncomfortable, and I would swing from highs to lows that had nothing to do with my personality, but with exhaustion, hunger, and long patterns of suppressing myself. Now I can feel sadness, anger, joy, or even calmness without it consuming me. I still cry, I still struggle and grieve. I have fear and anxiety, but I've noticed the swings aren't as violent. I can sit with them without feeling like I'm falling apart. I think that part of that is simply having the space to recover. When your body and mind aren't constantly under assault, you can start to feel your own emotional range again. Something I always hoped might happen if I got better, but I've been really happy to feel again, is how much recovery has allowed me to help others and increased my drive to do so. I can volunteer, run support groups, make videos, do one on one peer support with confidence because I've actually lived through experiences and I can reflect on them and know that my advice works. It's a strange, humbling joy to realise that the advice I offer is grounded in reality and that it can actually make a difference. That's a freedom I always grieved before recovering, being able to show up for other people too. I'm extremely grateful that I can actually start to do that now. And I think one of the most profound shifts for me, though, is a sense of agency and choice, not just in the practical things like deciding what to eat or how to structure my day, but in how I'm allowed to be in the world. Recovery has taught me that safety, consent, and autonomy aren't just abstract ideals, they're things you can build for yourself. I've noticed myself relaxing into life in ways I couldn't have imagined before, letting small joys in, letting space exist in my day for nothing urgent or pressing. My flat, my routines, my work, these videos, even the silly little things like watching my bunnies, they feel like markers of ownership over my own life. I also got back into climbing. When I was 18, I managed a couple of years out of hospital, and even though I was still very unwell, I got really into climbing. I was even coaching and going outdoors at that time. Since then, I'd had the occasional climbing session, but my life and my eating disorder didn't allow me to keep it up. Sometimes I would arrive, cry, and leave. I pushed myself to keep trying, but eventually I stopped. Thankfully, over the last couple of years, I've gotten more and more back into it. And for over a year now, I've been climbing at least twice a week. I feel strong again, with a steady awareness that I'm keeping it up, that this year I'll be getting outside more, and that the world is opening up for me in ways that feels familiar to when I was 18, but better and more stable this time because I'm actually eating well. And climbing again reminds me that I can reconnect with life in ways that I thought that I'd lost. Another side effect of recovery for me has actually been being tidier, which still feels a bit strange to say out loud, but in the past, my eating disorder took almost all my time and energy, and my self esteem and self care were so low that I dreaded anyone coming into my flat, especially landlords or agents. I avoided reporting problems, even really serious ones like massive leaks in the roof. I had things like a burst toilet pipe that affected the building, mould, no heating, roof leaks, no hot water, and I still struggled to push for repairs, either because I felt too anxious about asking for what I needed or because I couldn't face someone entering my space. I assumed that that was just how I was. But now I take real pride in my living space. I keep it clean, I stay on top of things, and when agents come for inspections, they've actually told me I'm their best tenant. And that still surprises me a bit. I think it shows how much recovery changed my capacity and even what seemed like traits of my personality to care for my environment. And I believe that I'm allowed to take up space and ask for what I need. And yet, it's not a neat, perfect transformation. I still notice the remnants of my old fears, my old patterns, my not really wanting to ask for help. I still sometimes worry about being alone, about whether I can cope, about whether I deserve care. But now those fears sit alongside a growing sense of possibility rather than dominating everything. It's a strange balance, and sometimes it's a bit fragile, other times more solid, but it is mine. And I think that if there's one simple reframe I'd offer someone listening, it's that recovery doesn't just remove the things that hurt you, it reveals the parts of yourself that you've been too exhausted or too blocked to notice. And those parts are often far stronger, far more capable, and far more human than we ever allowed ourselves to be. So when I look back, I don't just see the eating disorder fading. I see a person learning to trust herself, learning to feel safe in her own mind and body, learning to love and accept care without fear, and slowly building a life that she can belong in. And that really is what recovery has changed the most for me. Maybe for you it looks different. Maybe it's the way you can sit with a friend without hiding your pain, or the first moment that you feel proud of yourself without guilt. I think those small moments that are less easily noticed are often where real recovery lives, and they are possible, even when it feels completely impossible, even when it feels completely too far away. I did not think that it was possible to get where I am. For over 15 years, I was convinced that as much as I tried to get better, my eating disorder would be the death of me, that the best I could hope for was to live some life around it. And I'm very, very grateful and relieved to say that I was wrong. Thank you.